Okay, we're doing Tafan Al Halacha. Kalim Shenishtam Shem B'Cham. Kalim that use them for hot, so they need to be kasher. So then is Kafi Tashmish and Hag'alah. The way they were used, that's how you kasher them. Im Tashmish and Klivishin. If you use them with the Klivishin, Kohen Kavshim Megisim B'Kedera, Tzarech Hashim B'Klivishin. The Im Tashmish and B'Klisheni. If you only use it as a Klisheni, Hag'alah B'Klisheni, and Uklisim Mishamish by Irui, Shalam Klivishin. What happens if you're in between a Klivishin and a Klisheni? You're just Irui Klivishin, then L'Sagle B'Hachshel the Klisheni. You can't, it's not considered Klisheni, it's a little higher, El Tzarech Laris, El B'Klivishin. You have to Hag'alah from a Klivishin, just like you had a Bli of Irui Klivishin, you also have to have a Hag'alah Klivishin. Let me just read the Ramah. Kol HaKelim Sheish Them stuck on a Gumas HaChaluda V'hu B'Sech HaKli. Then Lo Yuchel Nachal HaKosem, and you can't clean out the dirt or the rust or things like that, then Ein Hagilan, the Tzrich Lib Makom Hastak, you have to leave it to get rid of the band. Okay, so we talked about this separately, it's not really part of this thing. Okay, so what's the main part of it then? What does the Mechaber say? He says a rule that we call Kabbalah Kachpotay, which is as follows. In the Psukim, based on Psukim, the Mishnayos say that if you have a kli that was used directly on the fire, then you do leave one. If you have a kli that was used with a hot liquid or something like that, then you do Hag'alah. That comes from Psukim. That's the Torah's Kabbalah Kachpotay. That's as much as it says like that. The Rishonim, I believe it's a Rif who says it first. The Rishonim say that you should know within the din of Hag'alah there's also Kabbalah Kachpotay. Just like for the whether you should try to leave it or Hag'alah, you do Kabbalah Kachpotay. Within Hag'alah itself, you do Kabbalah Kachpotay. And that's this thing. If the Bli was in the Klivishin, you do Hag'alah in the Klivishin. If the Bli was in the Klisheni, they do the Hag'alah in the Klisheni. That does not say in Torah, and I don't believe it's in the Gemara either, that you could have levels of Hag'alah within Hag'alah. But that's the Rif says that you could do that. There's rule within the rules of Hag'alah. There's Klivishin and Klisheni and things like that. The Gemara does say something else. The Gemara talks about what we call milu v'irui, which is not for our din, and that the Gemara sort of talks about milu v'irui, and that is not from a pasuk, and that's understood to be Kabbalah Kachpotay also. So if you want to see a Gemara that says like that, okay. So but this over here is a riff. Then in more modern times, in the past 50 years, modern day poskim have taken this riff another step further, and they said is not only do be mechal between the Klivishin and the Klisheni and the Ilui, but also between the temperature. That if a thing is used only at 160 degrees, then you can kasher it at 160 degrees also. They said also that's Kabbalah Kachpotay. Just like Kabbalah Kachpotay says a Klisheni is different than a Klivishin, also they said that you could say that within a level of Hag'alah, let's say a Klivishin, you could be mechal between one temperature and another temperature, to say like that. Okay, so that's an extension of the Rif, which is an extension of the Mishnah. So but it's worth noting for all of these things that the Da'at Moshe says and the Pri Megadim says, and what Moshe says that kind of makes you feel more modern also, that even though there are all kinds of rules like this that you say Kabbalah Kachpotay, that you could do that within the levels of Hag'alah and the temperature of Hag'alah you can be mechal between different kinds of kelim. The minig is to do all Hag'alah in a Klivishin that's on the fire at Roshchan. That's the minig, is to always do the top level of Hag'alah, no matter what the case is. Okay, so that's to say the din is that you can. Dr. Moshe says it? Dr. Moshe says it, yeah. He doesn't say it for temperatures, because for him that wasn't such a thing, that they cooked at 160 and they cashed at 160.
What meaning does that have coming out of the Dr. Moshe?
Sure.
In other words, if he was not, there was no discussion of doing it at temperature, so of course you got to do it at oil.
No, because he's talking about, like, in our case, that the Rif is saying that you could do it for Klivishin or Klisheni. If the Bli was only in Klisheni, you could do Hag'alah in Klisheni. Hag'alah was Irui Klivishin, you could do Kashrus Irui Klivishin, but the minig is to always do it as Klivishin that is first. That's the minig, is to always do the full level of Kashering. So he's saying in his context.
So his bigger point is there should be Klivishin. That is Roshchan, it was Piston.
Right. Well, no, because Irui is also not Roshchan al Gabi Eish. The minig is to always do Irui with the Klivishin al Gabi Eish, with Roshchan to do the full Hag'alah, the full max Hag'alah, which is that is a max. There's a maximum of Hag'alah. So this is like the top. So the minig is supposed to do the maximum. Okay, so now, but it's only a minute. It's not the din. That's the minute. So that means is that in a normal situation, if a person's trying to kasher, they don't say, oh, the blia was with Iru, so I can kasher with Iru. They should say, no, the blia was with hot, and therefore I should kasher with Hag'alah and Kashering. Okay, but you say, I have a countertop. Well, I can't stick my countertop into a Kashering agabe eish. There's no such thing. You can't physically pull it off. Okay, good. So then you can't do it. So then you go with Ikradin. But if you can do it, then you're supposed to do Hag'alah, the Kashering, agabe eish, the full 9 yards, the whole thing. Okay, so now, let me do some simple examples first, and we'll move on a little bit. Okay, the simple examples of these kind of differences between like Kashering and Iru and things like that are, I mentioned a counter. It's going to be a counter and a table are going to be halacha later. I'm going to leave that to them. Okay, counters and tables that they have blias like they eat, not right on the fire, of course. There it also has a question of a double gush. That's a different halacha later. And the simple example that we have is a sink and a faucet. And if you think about it, no, you can't. A sink is not a Kashering, but a sink has Iru Kashering. A person, let's think for chametz. A person takes their pot of pasta, and after they cook it up, they pour the water into the sink. Okay, so they're doing Iru Kashering, have a bli of chametz from Iru Kashering onto the sink, and that's why you kasher your sink with Iru Kashering. But if you think about it also, there's the faucet, I don't know what you call the thing, the place where the water comes out of, the spout, okay, whatever it is, the part that reaches over the sink could theoretically have Iru Kashering. It also has a different blia. When you pour the...
Which part does it have? The faucet itself? No.
The place where the water comes out, I don't know what you call that part. The part when not the knobs.
The spout.
The spout. That part. It's depending on how sloppy you or your kids are. They may have Iru, or it might not have Iru.
Definitely will have Iru.
What?
It definitely will have Iru. I think it's splash from a Kashering onto it, right?
From a Kashering onto the sink.
Onto the spout.
Onto the spout.
Yeah, over the whole year, you pour a thing of some of the water from the past and over directly in the thing.
Well, if it goes directly, right? It was from the pot, it would have to go directly.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yes, correct. And another side of it is then this tries to double gush also. When after the pasta gets plopped into your sink, into the strainer, into the colander that's in your sink, then there comes up from that. Okay? That's there from a double gush is a little more sophisticated. Right? That's hitting the sink from the underside from there from a double gush. So that has right. So that also the same. Right, it'll lead some kind of a kashrus for that also. So that's like our regular, everyday examples of Irus and things like that are not regular Kashering. You know your sink is not a Kashering. No one ever cooked up something in the sink.
The things are a bit of Kashering.
Because?
I don't know. And the rest of the whole tshuva, those things.
Dan?
What?
That one?
I don't know.
Okay, so we'll look it up. Okay.
Now, definitely, we'll look at the thing that, they can kasher.
It has to be Kashering. I'm trying to say that. How do you make it into a Kashering?
No, the side is, let's say the same spot.
Okay.
It's the same nusuk. It's different places.
Okay.
Yeah, Pashas.
Okay.
Pashas is a thing that basically shape.
Or Iru.
More it could be.
Okay, so you said it's true, we could look it up. Fine. Okay, now, another example, a real modern day example of things like this is a microwave. Okay, that we're gonna when you cook something in a microwave, the blia is not done in the traditional way that you cook up a pot of water, like the way we do usually, the traditional pot of water on a fire. It's done in a different way. And there's shilas about the kashering that people, the way that people usually kasher their microwave is. They say exactly. If mamash comes right out of it, they do kabbalah kachpota. They say, how do the blias come into my microwave? Things spill over, or zayas comes out of the pot and out of the food that's cooking there hits the chamber of the microwave. So the kasher like that, they say, I'll boil up water in a cup in the microwave, and I'll let it spill all over the place, and I'll let the zayah cover the whole chamber of the thing, and I'll be doing a kabbalah kafota. That's the general idea of what they're trying to do. They're trying to recreate the same way the blia went in, which is what the din says. You say, okay, the blia things spill, I do it by spilling. Things there spreads all over the whole chamber, so I can.
It has to spill over the cup.
well, you have to catch the floor. And the things spill during use. Things spill over.
Usually the glass things. You just take the glass thing out.
Right. So you can just remove the glass, put in a new one, or put in a plate, some paper, or something like that. But that's how things do.
Or put if you like something.
Or put that in. Well, okay. And the rest of it, it has this glias rosea. So it's a cloud that just forms. I think that's spit. So I'm boiling up my cup of water. I'm recreating that. I'm doing the same thing. If I do it for long enough, that it covers the whole thing. Okay. Microwave has a separate problem, which again we're not going to do now. Again, Mishra later, by the end of a calendar, which is that the microwave.
What is a calendar?
A calendar is a thing that you.
It's a word, by the way. Not the calendar used for the dates.
It's something. It's a sieve that you put in pasta into to drain the water out of it. You pour the pasta into. Anyhow, so it's we will get to, which is a strainer. It's a separate problem we have for a microwave is that the microwave has many nooks and crannies, and in particular, it has a grate on the side where to protect where the rays and the light come out of. There's a grate on the side, and the thing is, you're not supposed to capture things with tiny holes in it. Okay, so we'll see when we get there. Maybe Rabbi Schwartz had a reason why you should maybe be allowed to, but you're not allowed to capture things with little holes and the things that are very difficult to clean. And a microwave is a great example of that because it's hard to get into, like we just saw in the Ramah. It's hard to stick your head into it and get the whole thing clean. And particular things with holes, even if you try to clean the things, you're not allowed to.
Particular matter that gets in those holes.
And you must have a very neat home because in most houses, that stuff is an absolute mess. The inside of the microwave, or maybe you use your microwave always covered. Do you use your microwave always covered?
Wait, the food always covered?
Yeah. Okay. If you use most people's microwaves, well, if you look into a microwave, it's dirty.
Yeah, it's dirty. Like those holes, they're high up. Not on the floor. They're like higher up in the microwave, so you can get in there.
Not in, because they're just stuck into the holes, just as flat as any place. So, okay. So maybe your house is very neat. Okay, we'll get there. We're not saying it. We're not saying it. Okay. Now I'm going to move to another case. This is an industrial case. Okay. You have what Tyson says. Tyson says a question. He says, what's the difference between a Kli Rishon and a Kli Sheni? We were just talking about this the other day. What's the difference between a Kli Rishon and a Kli Sheni? If they both have the same temperature, why does one have these kind of layers and one has these kind of layers? What's the difference?
Why don't you look at the temperature?
Right, or say if it's right, so it's right. So why are we being differentiated between Kli Rishon and Kli Sheni?
You say that's how in the physician, right?
Possibly. I mean, or even a Kli Rishon, we say as soon as it pours into the next Kli, it's the first thing it hits is called Irui, and then when it starts to spread around, that's called Kli Sheni. Let's go on, it's all the same temperature. What's the difference? So that's the Tyson's question. And Tyson's
where is this?
In Shabbos, about Mem, something like that. Okay, I can find you exactly where I'm going if you want. And Tyson says, that the difference is like this. In a Kli Rishon, the walls are helping in heating the product. The walls are hot. The walls get hot before the water does. The walls are helping in the heating. In a Kli Sheni, his words are defined on Kashrus, the walls are cold. So the walls are cooling off. So the water, the product that's in there might be the same temperature, but is the product getting hotter or is it getting colder? In the Kli Rishon, the walls help in making it hotter. And in the Kli Sheni, it's on its way down, it's cooling off. And therefore it has different properties. What it could do is different. So therefore when we say a Kli Sheni can't do as much as a Kli Rishon, it's because Kli Rishon is boiling hot and it's stable or it's getting hotter. And the Kli Sheni is cooling and therefore it's not able to do the same things. Okay? Not that I can say I fully understand what he said, but at least he's giving a structure which understands what the answer is.
Not like that.
Well,
you can never take a Kli Rishon and it's off the fire, turn off the fire, and it will elevate the heat.
No, I didn't say. I don't mean it has to be making it hotter, but it stays. It doesn't
oppose it.
Right, it doesn't go against it. In the Kli Sheni,
it's going to go down.
In the Kli Sheni, the walls are working against the water. Okay, so whatever. That's what Tyson how he sets it up. So now, what happens? What happens if you have a Kli Sheni, but the Kli Sheni doesn't have the finest makaros? What happens if we take away the walls cooling it down? What is the example?
Again,
what?
If you use the cup repeatedly to the Kli Sheni, right? You want to transfer.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Correct. But a ladle. If you use a ladle, so the shaila is that's correct. That's what Todd talks about over there. That a bowl of soup on Shabbos might be considered a Kli Sheni. Not a Kli Sheni. You wouldn't say that it's lost being a Kli Sheni because the ladle might be considered a Kli Rishon also. Because the ladle keeps getting hot. You dunk the ladle in again and again, and it gets hotter. It's not the finest makaros. That's in that kind of a case. But industrially we have a simpler kind of a case, which is if you put food, take something from Kli and you pour it through Kli Sheni for 5 hours in a row. I mean, you keep filling product in the fillers, and the example of it, a filler. You keep pouring stuff through it, hot product through at 180 degrees for hours and hours. The walls of the filler are not going to be cold anymore. It might be, in theory, Kli Sheni, but those walls are not Makaris anymore. The walls, after how much time, the walls are going to be just as hot as the product is. You keep putting more and more, it's not the same product. It's not like you put in a bowl of soup. You keep pouring more and more bowls of soup on this thing, so it gets to the point that it's not the product of Makaris. So if we take what Tyson says, that the rule is, a Kli Sheni is defined as being something that has the product of Makaris, if we take that away from the Kli Sheni, we say this Kli Sheni is not, it doesn't have the product of Makaris, then guess what? It becomes a Kli Rishon. So that means is that if a person wants to kasher that piece of equipment, so look, we would have to say now, l'chumra, to say the bliyah happened as a Kli Rishon, or at least say the bliyah happened without the product of Makaris. So the Hag'alah has to recreate that, and the Hag'alah has to also be without the product of Makaris. So if it took, let's say it took 15 minutes, I'm making up a number, it took 15 minutes to get to the point that the products were not Makaris, we'll have to do Hag'alah for 15 minutes, keep running water for 15 minutes to make it that it's not the products of Makaris anymore. Okay, so if, in particular, in fillers, there are fillers, it's called a piston filler, but it's not important what it is, but the fillers, the heads of the filler are, this is like the size of what it would be, made out of solid stainless steel. Okay? It's a huge piece, and they could be taller also. Okay, it could be size like this soda can, pop can. It could be this size, and made out of solid stainless steel. If you dunk this into boiling water for 2 seconds, or in some cases they have a hole through, you let the water run through it for 5 seconds or for 2 minutes, it's not going to get hot. The horizon, I touch them and they don't get hot. After you run, the guys have done what they call the Hag'alah. They pour the water onto it for a few minutes, they shoot it with a steam hose, or they run water through, and you touch it and it's cold. Okay? Because the thing is so thick that it just doesn't get the heat up. But we know that during production they ran something hot through there for so long that of course it got hot. And I didn't touch it during production. But come on, the thing is thick, but only to a point. So the Hag'alah then has to mimic what the Kashering was. Okay? Just like, in other words, you don't even have to be so fancy as to say what Tyson says, but that's what we're going to use. Tyson says if the finest Makaris if there would be no definite Makaris, it would turn back into a Kli Rishon. So l'chumra, we have to say that also that the bliyah was like that, so we have the Kashrus or the Kli Rishon. Okay?
Who's the first person who says this?
Okay, so who's the first person who says this? The Taz. Okay, the Taz says. What? But yes, but he's not talking. I'm not talking about the top.
He needs for a longer time.
Yeah.
Yes, he doesn't say. I'm not talking about Indian Hilchos Shabbos. He says Indian. I believe he says Indian Kashrus. I'm not sure. Okay.
No, in
your day, yes.
Yeah, but it's different. When the cup goes into the Kli Rishon.
Okay. So what's the difference?
Well, it becomes part of it. I'm
not talking about the case where it sat there for so long. If it sits there for so long that the water boils again, okay, that the water comes back to a boil while it's in there, so then it's much more like a Kli Rishon in that case. I'm telling you, even if you just put it in enough times, not that it comes back to a boil, but just being in this case submerged completely in the water, it just stops being cold.
Does he say this right? This has been many times it's not the final Makaris anymore.
I'm going to yes. There's another time which is not what I'm talking about. Who says that if you do Eruy a lot of times, then 100 Eruys is equal to 1 Kli Rishon. He does use those numbers. Many Eruys is like I'm not talking about because it's many Eruys. Most people do not go like that time. Not because there's many Eruys, but the Eruy is continuous. You do it for so long, you lose the final Makaris. You bring the
this idea.
It's not. Who says that
one long Eruy,
if the Eruy goes for so long that you lose the definite Makaris, then you bounce yourself back to being Kli Rishon. Yeah. Now the Taz says, but Rega, I'm about to go to the next step, which is the Taz says, but I'm only going to say this l'chumra. Okay. In other words, if the bliyah happened like that, then the Hag'alah has to have one of that also. Okay. The question is like this. The question we have is the following. This svara to say that you get rid of the finest Makaris makes into a Kli Rishon has a tzad kula to it also. What happens if you have a Kli that had a bliyah as a Kli Rishon? Okay. Let's say you had a spray dryer. Right? That's a good example of it. I was about to say a spray dryer. It had a bliyah as a Kli Rishon. Come on, the thing is on fire, and you want to kasher it with a spray ball. Okay. Now there's no fire. There's no fire in the spray dryer. So if you just with the spray ball, what are you doing? You're doing irui. You pour water from a pot of boiling water onto the spray dryer. Then how are you cashing it? It needs to be cashed as a clean mission. So you say, wait a second. So you don't say. Rabbi Belsky says, what you do is like this. If you run the water for long enough to the point that the metal of the spray dryer stops being defined as makaros, it gets to the point that the metal itself is as hot as the Kashering water is, then you turn it back into clean mission. So just like the blia happened in one kind of clean mission, and you cash it with a different kind of clean mission, you create the clean mission. Okay, that's one of the examples. And I'll give you some more examples in a second.
So we have to run it for a long time.
You have to run it for a long time. Wait a second.
Preheating the spray dryer.
No. Can you hold the preheating for a second?
Without the final of the...
Rega.
Right, it's not preheating. It's running for a long time.
Right, if you just run it for a long time. So he says, you run it for a long time, there won't be defined as a makaros, and then you will be turned back into a clean mission. So now, and I'm going to give you some more examples in a second. So that is saying that not only can you do it, should you do it l'chumra, that's saying that irui for a long time becomes a klirishin, but he's saying l'kula, that irui for a long time can make a klirishin, and that I can use that to kasher as if it was a klirishin. Okay, I have some other examples. It's in loads of dryers, things like that. What happens to a truck? Okay, a tanker truck that has a heating coil to it. It's like a klirishin. It's got a heating source on the bottom of it. Okay? And many times it has a heating source on the bottom of it. Okay, you put on the heating source, so you keep the stuff hot the whole trip, and then you come to Kashering and you kasher with a spray ball. Okay, you don't put some of the heat over there when they do that. What happens if you have 3 tanks in a row that have to be kasher? They're all jacketed kettles that have to be kasher. And what do? You say, what? I need to boil up 3 tanks full of water. I'll boil up the first one. And then I'll transfer the water from here to there to there. Okay, so then at best, what I'm doing is I'm transferring from here to there, and I am saying this boiling water will go to the next tank, which it was belay as a klirishin, but I will make it to not be defined as makaros. That's at best. Okay, really, in that case, you have an easy answer. In that case, what you'll do is you'll leave this jacket on. You don't have to boil the water, you just put the jacket on so that there is steam flowing through it. It's like back to being klirishin. Okay, but let's say in the truck, let's say in the heater, in a dryer. Or there's another case, and this is a fancier case, which is the Shach says that the davar charuf in a klisheni has the din of being in a klirishin. Okay, even though usually klisheni is not the same as klirishin, when Indian b'diavad, that b'diavad we say there are no blias in a klisheni if someone made a mistake. But the Shach says, but that's not true for davar charuf. Davar charuf that's in a klisheni has the din of being in a klirishin. So here we have an example of that is I fill vinegar. Usually, in theory, vinegar does not have to be pasteurized. It doesn't spoil. It doesn't need to be pasteurized. But lots of companies do pasteurize it because it makes it not as cloudy. They get some of the cloudiness out of it, and it makes it look better. So a lot of people pasteurize vinegar before, not because they need to. It just happens to be. It makes it look better. So that person pasteurized the vinegar, and they run it through the filler. And it fills hot. So that filler had a davar charuf going through in a klisheni. Let's say it's called a klisheni. But the din is that's considered like a klirishin. Even though it was only klisheni, in din we look at it like the blia was in a klirishin. Okay, so for all these things, so Rabbi says, look, what's the problem? We got rid of the defined makaros, and we could be. So now we made it to a klirishin. Okay, so the problem is like this. The Taz says that you can do the Hag'alah, this case that I told you, if you take a ladle out of a pot and you put it in enough times that it becomes no more defined as makaros, then l'chumra you have to kasher as a klirishin. They say l'kula. The Pri Megadim on there says that you could do it l'kula, but you can't do it l'chumra. You could do it l'chumra, but you can't do it l'kula. It means you can't take the ladle out of the pot and then stick a fork into the ladle and kasher your fork in that ladle. Because that would be calling it a klirishin, kula, to treat this as a klirishin. He says you can't do that. The Pri Megadim says you can't do that. And he says the Pri Megadim's reason is, he says, a kli that's heated with water is not the same as a kli that's heated with fire. Here you have your fork got a blia on the fire. Let's say a spoon. You stir the pot on the fire. Now you got a blia through something that was heated directly by a fire type of heat, and now you're having a blia that's happening through the water heat. The heat that came to the ladle came through the water, not through the fire itself. It had like the in between together like that.
And even if you let the ladle stay in the pot till it was boiling, the water in the ladle was boiling, it still wouldn't be.
So that I don't remember, because then the fire mamish went straight to thing. I don't remember how 50 says that.
So back to spurring.
Okay, wait. Yes. Then there's another thing. I'm looking here also. Okay, the Chavis Das says that Pri Megadim might be based on the din that you're not allowed to use for Hag'alah Chamit Tferir. Okay, if you have water that's heated by naturally hot springs, you're not allowed to use them for Hag'alah because we say heat of water through fire is not the same as heat of water through hot lava or whatever heats up Chamit Tferir. Okay, that's a din that it has to be heated through the same type of a source, and that's seemingly where it comes from. Okay. Okay.
Really?
Chamit Tferir is a din source.
Yes. Right? From Eishel Gehenna.
Yes.
1 second. So if you have this, things heated with electricity, you have a problem. Things heated with jacket. Once it's called a fire, you want to catch them with a jacket and kettle. Let's say somebody will set up a Kashering station with a jacket and kettle. That's how you put the time, right? And the guy just cooks the homeowner with a fire. It's so good.
Think about that. You think if I'm he doesn't say it's I'm saying that he means Chamit Tferir. What he says heated by water, that's same as heated by fire. So what kind of din is that? I'm saying to you that like the din of Chamit Tferir. So we have to see exactly what the case is. But I have a different example. There's someone at this conference, the Vibe conference. What happens if the Hag'alah was through regular water and you want to Kashrus through water heated in the microwave? Should we treat that as Chamit Tferir? Because the water wasn't heated through the traditional, fire. An electric coil is probably just heating in the fire. That's just a different form of fire. Okay, Yesh wasn't, I don't know. If we remember, we get the Chamit Tferir. It's one like the last thing. Okay. Now, then there's another thing. The Chavis Das brings the Minchas Yaakov, which I did not see inside. The Minchas Yaakov says that the reason why you can't do it with Kula is because when Taisa says that you have the Panas Makaras, Taisa doesn't mean that these things are cooling. He means is even if the walls of the Kli are neutral, that's also not enough to make you consider Hag'alah. In order to be considered Kli Rishon, it's got to be that the walls of the Kli are positively adding to the heat. Something that's neutral doesn't count. Something that's neutral is not considered Kli Rishon. Okay, and there are three types. There's walls can make it hotter, the walls can make it cooler, and the walls can be neutral. They could be doing nothing. So the Minchas Yaakov is supposed to say, to be a Kli Rishon, you have to have the highest level, that the walls are making it hotter. But if the walls are neutral, or the walls are making it cooler, that's the case that Tosfos means it's not considered a Kli Rishon. So in our case, the walls over here might be not making it cooler, but they're not making it hotter. They're in between. Or they're neutral. They're not adding or taking away. They're the same temperature.
How is the Kli Rishon making it hotter? Because
in a Kli Rishon, the wall when you put a pot on fire, when you put the pot on the fire, the metal gets very hot, and then that heat is pushing into the water. Even if you turn off the fire, the metal is still very hot, and it still could keep giving heat into the water. That's how we go. As opposed to the Kli Sheni, the walls only are as hot as the water made them. They're not hotter than the water to be able to enter. Okay, so there were lots of. Okay, here's a whole bunch of poskim who are saying, yes, there's merit to this idea. They're not. It's not like they're not saying it. There's such a thing that Eruv for a very long time should be considered like a Kli Rishon, but they're all saying not to do it l'kula. Okay, and there are cases when people want to use this l'kula. So I asked the Sherbaski, who said,
you know who Minchas Yaakov was?
Yes, it's the same person who wrote the Chok Yaakov on Archaim. And what? I don't know. Okay, it's a early Achron. Okay, he wrote a Pirush. His Minchas Yaakov Pirush is the Ramah wrote a sefer called Teres Chatas, which is Isser V'Heter Sefer, and the most famous Pirush one is called Minchas Yaakov. Most Teres Chatas is called with the Minchas Yaakov on the bottom. That's an early Achron. So I asked the Sardowski, goes back many years, and he said like this. He holds that all of these people is cases are different than his case, because in all of those cases the heat that made the walls not be Tepanis Makaros is now not connected to the Kli. Let's take the case of a ladle. I stuck the ladle into the water, and it sat there for a while that the ladle became hot. Then what did I do? I took the ladle out of the pot, and now I'm trying to catch something inside of it. So the ladle got heated by the water in the pot, and it's not connected to the pot anymore. So now the ladle, to an extent, could revert back to being cliche. The ladle lost its connection. The whole thing that made it hot was that water, and now it's not that water anymore. So just losing the defiance of Makaris, but not being connected to the water doesn't count. In our case, where we're spraying water continuously, the thing that's making it not be defiance of Makaris is still here. It keeps on pumping in heat into this thing. So let's say the Milchus Yaakov said you can only call something not defiance of Makaris when it's giving more heat. But if it's neutral, you can't do it. Here it's not neutral. Here it's giving more heat because here you keep pumping in more water. Here the walls keep being able. The walls are not cooling. They haven't lost their connection to the heat source. They're still connected to the thing that's making them not be defiant of Makaris.
Not true.
What do you mean?
You start pouring in water, right? To heat up. This is pre-Kashering. This is first heating up. Okay. That's it. Now next water, that's going to be Kashering. Okay. Where's the connection of this refinery to the heat? What are you talking about?
You're saying because if we call this the Kashering water, then it's not the defiant Makaris water?
Yeah, that's not. They're pouring water. You're pouring more water, new fresh water, fresh hot water. Not connected to the heat. It's just okay. The Kashering water, right? The moment you call it, this is the Kashering water. So there's the Kashering water. It's not the heat's not coming in.
It's the same water. Keeps going around and around.
Right, but it
will be somehow some leads to that. I don't know.
There's a spray dryer that I go to in Kashrus that has a tank. He took the water.
Yeah.
The spray will send it through out the spray dryer.
Yeah.
And then it's caught in like this big dumpster.
Nice.
Stainless steel dumpster, like,
Yeah.
And it sends it right back to the original tank.
Okay, so
But it's a cooling loop.
even then.
Right, but he's saying, his main point is that all the cases where there's no more defiance of Makaris is it's lost its connection to being. Whatever made it not defiant of Makaris is not here anymore. So the wall.
What's the kitchen? There's a stove there with no. This is connected as this. It's still there. The stove is.
No. Let's say I take my sink, my kitchen sink, and I pour boiling water from a pot into the sink, and I keep on pouring boiling water.
Yeah.
So you say the defiance will not be Makaris, but if I let's say I fill up the whole sink with water, and now the walls are burning hot, but that heat is not connected to a fire. That heat is separated now from the real thing that gave heat. All that's left over is like a residual heat, and that's not as great as the cleavage. Okay? Maybe I'm having a hard time explaining because I think the question is stronger than the answer. But he tried to give an answer that their cases are it's lost the connection to its original heat source. Okay? But in this case, in our case, when we do the Kashering, we're still connected to the heat source. The water coming out of the spray bowl is connected somewhere back to the fire, to the boiler, whatever it is, and it's heating. So there's still a connection, and that's a stronger case. The reason why I say that the question may be stronger than the answer is because it's not like we ask a question that maybe you could say like this, and you could say maybe you could say like that. All the people who are talking about really about his case. They're bringing up, should we say Taisus is Svara L'Kula? And they're all saying, no, we're not going to say Taisus Svara L'Kula. So we're now saying he's giving an answer to say, yeah, we can say Taisus Svara L'Kula. Okay, it's a question. I want to just go back to what Don said before, which is by a spray dryer there is a mile. In a spray dryer, at least, where you can preheat it, okay, which is common, most people usually preheat it. So then, by putting on the fire and preheating it, we've at least created into a cleavation that's not agave age. Okay, we've done things, let's say, for example, the Milchus Yaakov said it has to be able to be that the walls are so hot that they add heat. Well, we've done that. The walls are to that point. We didn't just make it not the...
You got a hot and you got...
No, it's not about kapot, because during production, the fire is on.
I mean, also the fire was on.
It was on, but not during Kashering. During production, the fire is on. But during Hag'alah, the fire is not on anymore. You turn it off before you start the Kashering. But at least we made into a cleavation agave ish, and now it's cleavation shalei agave ish. We did something. We get a lot closer. But if you go to other dryers where they don't even have a preheating, or you don't preheat it, or a lot of other cases, you take your truck.
Why, you can't preheat it? Other dryers?
I guess you could. I'm saying, but that's not what people usually do. They just nothing. They have this spray bowl. They have their thing for cleaning. They clean it. So we don't even have that to say. In order to do it, you have to really be signed up completely on this thing. I have to just tell you, Rabbi Shasta, when he heard this, this is very much his way to answer the question. He said, look,
how long ago was this posed?
A couple of years ago. It was a couple of years ago. He said, Rabbi Shechter said, well, if the Kalim are ain't been the Yerman and the company is not so good anyhow, okay, good. Because for cases like that, I'll be some Rabelski. He says, well, usually also in most cases the Blia only happened like that. It's like a filler. The Blia was extended Eris, so you thought, oh, an extended Eris. Then it makes sense. Or in cases ain't been Yerman, all kinds of special kind of cases. Okay, so then one could be some kind of. He said his Rabbi Salvage told him this thing, the same svara l'chumra that you could do it for kasher. He was apprehensive about saying it l'kula. To say l'kula in cases where it's mamash l'kula, where you're just doing it kashering as a ben yoyma and you're ready to go and the whole thing is hanging on this svara, he wasn't so excited about it.